started with that. Thanks everyone for the understanding. Great. And I will now pass it off to the rest of our panelists. We'll start with Angela. Angela, can you please just share your name, your pronouns, your company, and the company you work for and the title you have there?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everybody. Angela Caffarelli. My pronouns are she and her. I work for Prudential Financial as a career partner. So just really quick on what that is, because most people don't know, is Prudential actually has myself and 3 others that are in charge of helping all domestic employees with their career journey. So anything from resumes to workshops to pretty much you name it when it comes to your career. So I am fortunate enough to work for the Future of Work team at Prudential, helping with careers. So excited to be here and excited to do this panel today with everybody.
Great. Thanks, Angela. Laura?
Yeah.
Hi guys, my name's Laura Hayward. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I work for Bank of America in a part of the business that sells financing services to hedge funds. So I'm a director within our sales and trading portion of business with a specific focus on prime brokerage sales. The role particularly is a little bit abstract and no one's ever heard of it until they've done it somewhere or another. But I've done it for my whole career, and I sit ultimately between hedge funds and asset allocators, which is a pretty important time to be doing that given how many groups are reallocating and how much capital is moving around at the moment.
Great, thanks. And Amina, do you want to finish us off for intros?
Yeah. So hi everyone. Happy Friday. I hope everyone's healthy and safe. So again, my name is Amina Shahzad, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm currently a supply chain manager at Bristol Myers Squibb, BMS for short. So for those of you that are not too familiar with what BMS is and what we do, we are a global biopharma company focused on our mission to really discover, develop, and deliver innovative medicines that help patients prevail over serious diseases. I'm also super passionate about diversity and inclusion, supplier diversity, and I'm also very fortunate to sit on the leadership team for our Pride Alliance ERG.
Great. Well, thanks again. And again, if anyone has any questions as we go through, feel free to throw those in the chat. But in the meantime, when I was thinking about motivation and as I was speaking to these panelists to start preparing for this, we kind of thought about motivation's 2 different sources. So internal motivation and external motivation. So we're going to start inside and we're going to work our way out. But Angela, I know it sounds simple, but why is self-motivation so important? And what are some small steps you found to help build motivation when you find that things are particularly challenging?
Yeah, so as everybody knows, like just the way that the world is right now, between racial inequities, between the unfortunate election, between all of that, not getting too political, but it's hard to keep that motivation, whether it is like your personal or professional, but it's still the same, right? So some of the things that I would say that I've been doing to help build that motivation is making it simple. And I know it sounds like we overcomplicate everything. Just the human race, we just love to overcomplicate everything. The way that I say that I like to really focus on motivation is taking like one thing at a time. Like maybe for the day, it's for me to get dressed. And I know that sounds crazy, but like it's really hard just mentally. So I'm somebody that struggles with anxiety and depression. Being in COVID is just even more so. It's been a strain on me, right? So what I like to do is I like to take one goal, either a day or a week, and check it off my list and feel like I accomplish it. So what I would say is, if you're struggling, take it small, start small. Maybe it's to accomplish a task. Maybe it's to connect with an individual, whatever that is for you. Maybe it's to go to the gym. Maybe it's to take a walk outside, whatever it is, start small. Don't come up with this grandiose list that you're never going to achieve. And then you're going to be really upset and be hard on yourself that you didn't achieve it. So what I would say is self-motivation is really important because it kind of continuously keeps you going, right? And something to look forward to. And I would say take those small steps in order for you to get there. So one of the things that I've been doing recently is I have, for those of you who are familiar with like Agile or like Kanban boards, I have kind of my list of things to do when it comes to me personally, just as I do professionally, because especially in times like these, you need to make sure that you're taking time for yourself, even more so. Like mental health and physical health and everything that comes along with that is extremely critical. So what I did for myself, as I mentioned, is I kind of have my list of things to do, and then I check them off my list. And then at the end of the week, I kind of reevaluate and say, all right, was that too much? How do I feel? You know, and really just being realistic with yourself and creating goals that you know that you can achieve. And the other thing that you can do, and what I've been doing most recently, is leaning on somebody else. So my fiance and I, her and I, have been kind of like bouncing off ideas off of each other, or trying to hold each other accountable, because when you're struggling, don't be afraid to ask for help, even if it is something that's with your personal, right? So personal comes first, and then the professional comes second. So I'd say take time for yourself, make sure that you're doing things that will embrace your mental health, and then just start small, start very small, and make it obtainable. You don't need to go for the biggest thing out there.
Thanks. And, that's something actually, Laura, I know that when we were talking, you work on a trading floor, which is typically like a very intense nonstop job. And you were talking about some of the ways that you've had to adjust your daily schedule and your personal time during COVID. So can you talk about some of the ways you balance that from work from home?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I'll just grab firstly is one of the points that Angela made around almost looking at this as a personal and a professional issue, where there is a huge amount of overlap in the middle, but that it's hugely important to be aware of time for yourself and how that creates a more professional person for you as a whole. So I think firstly on this topic is that the world is not what it was even 6 months ago. And your ability to motivate yourself is different, especially like I've been in the workplace now for 10 years. And I never felt any issue motivating myself at all. Like I remember getting asked it on an interview, like when I first joined the industry, like what motivates you? And finding it such a crazy question, because it was just so inherent in me. Like how on earth can I describe what it is that motivates me? And what I found now during COVID is that I have lacked a bit of motivation, but not because I'm apathetic about the world, but more because I've had a moment to actually like rethink the way that I structure my day and my time. And then, like you mentioned, on a trading floor, like there really is no personal time. Like work-life balance is a challenge at the best of times, but I think in a COVID world where work and life are one, and work from home is also the same as being home and working, like there really isn't much time and divisors between your time. And so for me, I had to find ways of really carving out that personal time so that I could be more motivated and use that same energy in my professional time. So some of the things that I've done are factoring in and almost being more understanding with yourself that no one is working the same way that they did before. Like no one is. And if they have you, everyone who answers a phone call from you will always say, oh, it's so crazy busy at the moment. We're rushed off our feet. No one is. Like it's very, very busy, but it's just really, it's busy in a different way. It's adjusting to the schedules that have changed at your side and at your colleague's side and at your client's side. And so what I've really taken is that everyone is dealing with their own lives in their work lives right now. And so you hear people's dogs in the background. Like I've got my wife sworn to keep the dogs quiet during this call just so that I have a semblance of professionalism here. But you hear people's dogs, you hear their children, like you hear their lives, you see their lives, you see their art in the background of calls, you like get a little cut and an insight into what they do with their day. And everybody's schedules have changed. And you've gone from having this like FaceTime culture where for a moment in everyone's day, all of your paths collide. Like you get on your commute in the morning and then all of your paths collide during the office place and then they all disband again at the end of the day. You're now in this moment where the collisions are different. Like someone has to get up earlier in the morning to get their kids fed and they get their kids on a Zoom call. Maybe I have to get up early in the morning to go and ride my horse who's in a field across the street from our house. Finding the places where your days align is really important. And also understanding that you don't need 15 hours or 12 hours, whatever your day used to look like, back to back on your computer to show motivation. Like you just need to find it in yourself to make sure you're getting your job done well and to adjust to the schedules of those around you. And to also be understanding with the fact that it doesn't look like what it did look like. And that doesn't mean you're working less hard. It just means you're working more creatively. So that's how I've spent my last 6 months justifying my work-life balance.
And Laura, I like how you looked at things on like a 6-month timeline. I know, Anna, you sometimes look at things on an even longer timeline. So you'll look 5 years back. and say, what advice would I have for myself 5 years ago? And what advice do I have for myself today? So is there any advice that you have for yourself today that would be different than 5 years ago? And what are some very specific ways you've adjusted at work from home as well?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't come up with this, by the way. Someone I was talking to at the beginning of COVID gave me this advice, and the way that the advice came was, hey, what were you doing 5 years ago? And my answer was, this was end of April, and that's my wife's birthday. So I was like, oh, 5 years ago, it was Jess's birthday. And I remember we were at a nice restaurant in San Francisco to celebrate. And all I could think about was, I need to leave this dinner to go work on this Excel model. I was like at the cusp between being an associate and being an engagement manager. And I thought like, oh my God, this is so important. Like this dinner's taking a really long time. And I was really distracted. And as a result, I kind of ruined the dinner. And, you know, in 2020, I would look at that and be like, oh, like sweet Anna, like it'll be fine. Like the Excel model will be fine. You will be fine. Like this doesn't matter. And so that's one thing that I've tried to use a lot now during COVID. So as an example, like 2 weeks ago, I was on vacation and we had just wrapped a big diversity and inclusion study at a bank. And we had the big sort of wrap up meeting with the head of HR the Monday of my vacation. So we had wrapped on Friday. And I was getting all stressed out about like, oh, this meeting's at 7 a.m. Jessica's going to kill me. Also, it was during PTO. This sucks. And like, as I started thinking about it, I was like, oh my God, in 5 years, is this one meeting going to matter? Or am I going to remember that I slept in and I went to the beach and took the dogs out? Clearly, that's what I'll remember. Clearly, that's the way to go. So it's just been a good frame whenever I'm stuck and spiraling to step back and be like, wait a minute, what really matters here? And then in terms of like little micro habits, similar to Angela, I'm a big like to-do person. And so I invested, and I don't get kickbacks from them, but it's called Fluid Stance. It's like a little whiteboard thing that sits between your monitor and your keyboard. And it's like a whiteboard. And so I literally have columns for my clients and I have a column for myself. And every Monday I'll write down like, what are the handful of things that if I do this week will be like a really good week. And then the rest is more like a daily to-do. And the satisfaction of erasing things is like really big. And just having something in front of me that like orients me in terms of what to do. Because otherwise you can lose your mind in Zooms. The second I did before COVID, but I do even more now, which is gratitude. Because I find that like it energizes my teams when you say things like thank you, or when you're like, hey, that was really well done. Like you really nailed that presentation. And so it helps others and actually gives me a lot of energy. And so I'm trying to do more of it even in COVID, whether it's like a quick Slack to someone or a text. That's been super helpful. And then checking in with people one-on-one. You know, those were the things that were really easy to do back in the old world, where it'd be like, hey, do you want to grab a coffee or whatever? And that gives me a lot of energy, is like one-on-one interactions. And so making sure that every day I have at least one of those on the calendar, because they're just really energizing. And you realize that people, to Laura's point, sometimes you're working with people and you're like, wow, I like really am not with it. Like they've nailed it. And then you sit down with them one-on-one and they're like, hey, like, how do you, like, you seem like you really have something going. And it's like, really? Because I thought you had, and anyway, it's just kind of humanizing when you're one-on-one with people. And so those are some of the things I've adopted now that are a little, I think it's amping up a lot of things I used to do before COVID and being more intentional.
Awesome, thanks. And you know, one thing, Amina, that we talked about that I thought was really interesting that you said was you felt like for you, self-motivation came from your workplace and came from working at a place where you could be comfortable and bring your whole self to work. So you're addressing a room of mostly MBAs. Could you talk a little bit about how you found the impact of culture on self-motivation and how you identified the right culture when you were looking at jobs?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So basically, as far as I can see personally, I think that, you know, if somebody is comfortable at their workplace, then they definitely feel as if they belong, you know, which I think is the number one thing employers should really focus on, not only when it comes to recruiting talent, but also retaining that key talent. So, you know, speaking from experience, I've been in the workforce about 7 years now. And, you know, in those 7 years, I've worked at multiple different companies. And some could argue, and I've actually received this feedback as well, that jumping multiple companies in a short, you know, time span really shows candidate instability or lack of loyalty to a company, et cetera. But I think that that focus really needs to shift from the employee to what the company is doing. You know, what has the company done to really foster an environment of security and belonging for that employee? You know, what has the company done in terms of promoting D&I into their ways of working? Is there a strong focus of, you know, avoiding unconscious bias in the workplace? You know, are leaders leading by example? So when companies really ask themselves these kind of tough questions, I think they really have to develop a strong focus on their employees and really make it known that their employees are their most valuable asset. So once a company really, in my opinion, creates this kind of culture, they'll definitely be able to see a more positive impact on employee performance, and employees basically just, you know, feeling that their point of view matters, that their differences are embraced and not just tolerated. And also from an engagement perspective, I think that they shift from more of an us versus them mentality to more so like a collaborative and teamwork attitude. And lastly, I think that, you know, a strong company culture really motivates the employees by helping them feel safe, you know, not just in terms of their job security, but more so also from a psychological perspective, psychological security, so that employees feel safe and free from harm. So I think that's definitely important. And in the past 5 years that I've specifically been at BMS, you know, all of these reasons are why you know, I've still been here. So I think for advice, I guess, for, you know, the MBA students, so when it comes to identifying a good cultural fit, I want job seekers, you know, to be more mindful about their job search. In order to assess if a company is a good fit for you, I think it's important for job seekers to really ask recruiters and hiring managers some questions that help them better understand the company. And, you know, everyone's different. So yeah, I could list out questions that would make an impact for me, but it's definitely, you know, you have to come up with some questions that really align to what you're looking for and what can help you better understand the company. I think, so that's the first thing. So the second thing, I think it's really important to do the research on the leadership team. So do the leaders just talk the talk, or do they also walk the walk? You know, I think it's important that if we see our leaders doing what, you know, they're saying, that really speaks volumes to the company. And I also think that it's really important for the D&I initiatives to be looked at. So what is the company doing to promote that diversity inclusion, especially, you know, in today's climate? This is way more important than ever. And it's really important for a candidate to choose a company who really invests heavily in this and does their part. And also the last thing I just want to mention is that it's important for the job seeker to really align with the company's mission and what they do. You know, so throughout these past 7 years, I've realized that the thought process that I used to have when I was looking for a job in a company, you know, I was chasing the name of the company or the industry, you know, that I was working in. But I realized that that when you finally find a company that's aligned with, you know, what makes you feel good and your purpose, you'll feel more content and secure.
Thanks. And that's actually a great bridge from kind of this idea of internal to external and how those two relate to each other. And so, Laura, when we spoke, you also talked about something really interesting that bridges this idea of internal and external motivation. And I think something we all struggle with is how we're perceived in the workplace and how our motivation is perceived in the workplace. So can you talk about some of the ways you've been able to advocate for yourself and show your motivation without being overbearing or feeling like you're getting in people's way?
Yeah, no worries. And I think on that topic, like being authentic is probably 2/3 of the problem there. That creating this perception that you're doing so much work is really like not viewed particularly well. And so it's quite good to do that in a way that is authentic with the brand that you have for yourself at work. So when we spoke, we talked a little bit about how your own internal motivation impacts those around you. And when you're physically in the presence of other people, it's quite easy for that to be contagious. And especially for the juniors on the team and talking to the cohort that we've got on this call today, like that's something really important when you're starting a career, is that you're surrounded by people that you enjoy working with and that their motivation rubs off on you and vice versa. the workplace a better place, both like personally and professionally, I guess, both from a delivery standpoint and the work that you do, but also the team that you're creating and the culture and atmosphere around you, which ties to what a lot of the fellow panelists have mentioned around corporate culture. And the fact that that is not something that you can, it needs you to dictate it from the top so that you have buy-in, but it's really created by every individual who joins the firm, and everyone is either additive or detracting from that. So being physically in the presence of your colleagues makes a real difference and helps portray your motivation. I think one thing that I've really learned, and I actually heard this a couple of years back and I've never applied it quite as well as I've applied it right now, is that there's a concept called feeding the bear, which is a way of delivering updates to your management in a sensitive and like understanding way that just showcases what you're doing behind the scenes. And especially now when no one is seeing physically what you're doing, it's so important. Like, you can be the hardest worker there, you can have your clients doing more than anyone else, and unless you're like showcasing those updates, there'll always be someone internally to try and take credit for that, or there'll be someone who just doesn't know really where the source of that came from. And so this like method that I heard of has been like pretty valuable, and it involves regular updates, potentially weekly, potentially daily, depending on the type of person that you're dealing with, like almost sitting down and mapping out your management structure, your boss's boss, like pick out your biggest sponsor in the firm, like some people that are important to you globally, as well as in your direct business line, and making sure that they're seeing small snippets of updates from you that add value regularly. And there is this like momentum concept, like if people see lots and little coming through from you, like lots as in regular updates, but little as in short snippets that are digestible, then it really gives the perception of motivation, and hopefully it is portraying the motivation that you have, and even in doing this shows that you are motivated as a person. But it bridges the fact that you are internally a motivated person, you are internally doing what you're meant to be doing, you're bringing in your personal passions at times. Like I often talk about it as my day job and my gay job, and I feel like my gay job almost never gets publicized in the firm. Like, why would it? I'm on a lot of panels and a lot of committees, but unless I'm telling my management, like, I'm missing an entire part of that story. And so the way you do this, so you basically have your business line and the people that matter to you internally mapped out. You look at the type of person they are. Are they the kind of person that needs like big updates that are really detailed about one given client or project that they care about? Or are they the type of person that really is on their BlackBerry between meetings and they'll read a quick email, reply thanks, but they're really not going to get involved in a project in the same way? Map them out, figure out what kind of person they are, and then also map down what projects that you're collaborating with them on, directly or indirectly. Like, what is it that you're doing day to day that they care about? And then those are the things, whenever you've had a call with that client that matters, you send them almost like a Twitter style update. By the way, just had a chat with this client, they said this. And the things that they care about, especially at the senior management level, are things that we take for granted, especially like a junior in the business. Like, you see so much more than you give yourself credit for. And so like even little things like talent turnover, like who are they hiring? What are they talking about? How does that impact you? Where's your time being spent in that day? Like, things that management just don't see. You might be spending hours and hours and hours on these accounts, but it doesn't get captured anywhere. And so giving them these Twitter style updates, like, client cares about this, this is what's happened recently. By the way, I've spent 3 hours on this project, and I know also that my colleagues have, and I want to make sure that you know that they're involved in it and they've done a great job. So like, calling out the people who've added value to the account alongside you is equally valuable. So just almost like map it out, tick it off when you've done it, like don't overdo it, but make sure that all of these interactions are authentic. You're like drip feeding information through to someone who hasn't got a big capacity for like long interactions, and you're creating a virtual, almost like those bump into each other in the coffee shop interactions that you used to have when you were in the office. You're creating a chance for a brief interaction with someone much more senior than you are to make sure that they're aware that you're doing a good job without chewing their ear off and telling them much more. That's what I've been doing myself, and that's what I think I would recommend to anyone coming into the industry.
Awesome, that's helpful. And panelists, I'm actually going to reverse the question, because I just realized I think there's a theme in that I want to pick up on. But to pass that to Anna, when we're thinking about like project management and the projects that you're working on and who you're working on them, who you're working with them on. It may seem counterintuitive, but I know you believe that sometimes actually adding more work, if it's the right work, can increase your motivation rather than decrease it. So can you talk about some of the ways you've used adding more work to your plate to actually increase your motivation in the workplace?
Yeah, so a little bit of the context there is our LGBTQ group on the West Coast has grown a ton. Now we have like 100 people now. And every year at the end of the year, we do a summit with the people in the community. And we say, okay, what does success look like for the next year? And so in 2019, when we did this in the West Coast, the big theme was we've done a lot as like glam internally, like we feel like we're connected, like all the things that we had prioritized in the past, we've made progress on. But where we really lag is actually like spreading our arms into the community, especially in cities like San Francisco where homelessness is so high, or LA, and actually making a difference beyond ourselves. And so that was like a big theme, is what else can we do in the community? Interestingly, we then had 5 nonprofits queued up of all sorts, think tanks, sort of foundations, film festivals, and COVID hit. And I was thinking like, man, maybe I should call all of this off. Like no one's going to have time for these like extracurricular type things. And I called every associate and business analyst that had raised their hand to be a part of this. And I was like, hey, are you like, I think I'm just going to call this off. Like we probably don't have time for this. And literally all of them independently said, no, this is like exactly what I need right now. Like I need to be spending time on things that matter because it gives me energy and it gives me meaning. And so I was like, okay, I was a little like cautiously like, let's see how this works out. You know, that was in March. We're into October now. And these things are like booming. Like everyone, more people want to be involved than they had than originally. The level of involvement is incredible. Like I couldn't have asked for like a more motivated team. And checking in with them, they're like, I love this. This is literally the thing that gives me energy every week, is these working sessions we have, you know, with a foundation or the film festival that's trying to stream more gay content online. It's kind of counterintuitive because it's more work, but it's work that kind of infuses you with meaning and purpose. And then the other counterintuitive one is like more Zooms sometimes, if they're the right Zooms, can also be energy inducing. So the one there is, because we're partnering with a few film festivals, we had one of them do like a live movie screening. And we timed it so that this was during Pride Month. And so it was like a Friday evening in Pacific time, like 9 p.m. East Coast time, morning in Asia. And we publicized it to everyone at McKinsey because who knows who wants to join the Zoom link. I literally thought, I was like pinging my friends to be like, please join. Like, I want to make sure there's enough people. There are hundreds of people that joined the Zoom. Again, on a Friday evening, there were people in India that had set alarm clocks to join because they didn't feel connected to the community. And this was something that felt like it connected them to the community. And so those are some counterintuitive learnings in terms of motivation, is sometimes more work with the right work. And frankly, more Zooms, but of the right type, like not a boring meeting, but like something that fills a gap that we otherwise fill.
Yeah, and I actually think I read a McKinsey study that attending more Rhomba sessions has a 100% correlation to more motivation. And I want to quickly ask a question, but also shout out one of our panelists. So Amina, I know you recently got promoted, so congratulations on that promotion. And one thing that I'd love for you to talk about is how you managed to use your sponsors and your allies in the workplace to not just get a promotion, but it was also a bit of a business unit shift, right? So you're kind of working on a totally different part of the business.
Yeah, no, so thank you for the shout out first, and thank you for the question. But before I really answer that, I want to differentiate between what a mentor is and what a sponsor is. And I'm sure that most of us have already heard this before, but I know sometimes I mix up the two definitions. But there are certain characteristics that kind of differentiate a mentor from a sponsor. So I feel, in my opinion, that a mentor is really someone, who can give you advice, who you look up to, and you see their career path, and you want to embody that someday. And they're there to really help you build a vision. I feel like when it comes to sponsors, they take that one step further, and they're really actively driving your career vision. They're sharing their network with you. They're really identifying key steps for you to, move forward, and really being your champion behind closed doors, in order to provide you that, more visibility. So I think it's also important to note that, you may have many mentors throughout your career, but you will only have a few sponsors. And because, like all relationships, it definitely takes time to build, and they have to actively be willing to support you. So I think the first piece there is for, these candidates, job seekers, to really differentiate between who your mentors are versus who your sponsors are. So for me personally, I've had many one-on-ones as well, and I plan to, have more throughout my career. I've gained many valuable mentors who definitely have really helped me where I get to where I am today. And I've really chosen my mentors by admiring their achievements and wanting to someday, be in their position. On the other hand, I have had 2 or 3 key people who I felt took that extra step to position me in the right way, to accelerate my career, or openly, vouch for me for a certain role, that, I may have not had too much experience in, but I showed my passion and willingness to grow and learn. So in that sense, I was also looking for allies at that point, that have the ability to really exercise their authority, and they have credibility within the organization to kind of help you, push you up. So, and then the next thing I really want to touch upon is about building trust and staying visible. So I think this is definitely key in gaining a sponsor or an ally. Similar to what Laura was actually mentioning, from a trust perspective, you definitely need to always deliver on what you say and add value. I think that's the key thing there. So if you're going to say, you're going to do something, you should most likely do it, because it shows that you are following through on what you're saying, and it really helps build your reputation as being credible. So for example, if you walk away from a one-on-one, with an action item on your end, whether it's setting up a one-on-one with somebody else, or, identifying certain things that you need to work on, make sure you definitely action them before your next one-on-one, or whenever you decided to do that by. And then from a visibility perspective, I recommend having one-on-one or check-ins with a few key folks on a regular basis. So for example, I have quarterly check-ins with a VP at BMS, just to share, what I've been working on lately, how my career map is progressing, and just to share, how they've been doing too, just to because everyone's human. So it's important to also check in to see how they're doing too. And I also have monthly one-on-ones with a few directors as well, since they can really provide me, I feel, in my opinion, more concrete advice on certain situations I might be facing in my specific role. So these one-on-ones definitely really serve as a reminder to them, and that you're still there and really interested in learning and growing with their support. So from my perspective, they appreciate that, and typically, one-on-ones aren't turned down. And the last thing is that you've probably already heard this before as well, but you need to drive your own career. So I've been in positions where I've, waited on my previous managers to kind of help push forward, right? But if you don't, you're going to be your own advocate. So you need to really ask for what you want. Otherwise, no one will know exactly what you're looking for or what you need to be successful. So if you feel like you want to go for a specific role or a certain project, you need to drive that conversation with your manager or, the individuals in charge, or even apply for that job, even if you have some self-doubt. It's important to be humble, but as long as you know that you're willing to put in the work and grow and learn, I think that's the one thing that's most important.
And that's great. And I think that's interesting, because you're really talking about how do you leverage your network when things are going really well, when you're crushing it at your job, and when you're about to get promoted and you're ready for the next step. And Angela, just to pass it back to you, can you talk a little bit about the best ways to leverage your network when maybe things aren't going so well, or when you need help, or when you're ready to reach out for a resource? And how do you, as a people manager and recruiter, see people do that successfully?
Yeah, so a couple all the panelists have definitely touched on some key themes like authentic, empathetic. All of these really key words are really important to have people in your network. The other thing I want to say is that my network, I make sure that it's just as diverse as I am. And by that, I mean, as much as I love other women, empowering women, I can't just have women, right? Like I need different point of views. I need people of different ethnicities, different races, different genders to make up my network. And the reason why I say this is that especially when you're in COVID or you're having trouble or whatever it is, you want to have individuals that you can have real conversations with, but you also want to have different people for different things, right? Like I have somebody that I go to, I joke, but like I have somebody I go to when I'm in tears and I need a cheerleader and I need somebody just to pick me up and I just need a vet session. Like I have that person. And then I have another person that I need a kick in the butt and I need them to be like, why didn't you do this? Like my network, I try to have those different personalities, especially in areas that I'm not good at. So I think the biggest thing that I could advise anyone is taking a step back and doing a self-reflection yourself and figuring out like who you are and what you need, and then building your network around it. The other thing is like, you know, the Mina did a great job of explaining like the difference between a sponsor and, you know, having somebody in your network, right? The other thing that's really important, what I see, is that you don't need 100 people. Like it's kind of like the saying, like you don't need 100 pennies. I'd rather have 4 quarters. I would rather have 4 genuine relationships with individuals throughout the organization. I think Laura mentioned it, but we were talking, and Anna mentioned it, but we were talking about having people in different areas, right? So you don't want just individuals that are in your business group. You want to have that international presence. You want other sponsors or people who can speak on your behalf that you don't work with daily. So back to the original question is, I leverage my network when I need it the most. I have to be true to myself, right? So asking for help is hard. I don't care who you are, it is hard. It's hard to admit that, hey, I'm struggling, or hey, I'm doing this. But if you build relationships where you can have these candid conversations, I bet you money you're not the only one that's struggling right now, right? Like everybody is struggling. So create a network of individuals that are empathetic, that are authentic, that you can get different things out of. And don't be afraid, because I bet you that this happened to me the other day. Like, just to give a quick example, is I reached out to a colleague and I was like, I'm struggling at work. Like, I just feel like I'm on Zoom calls every day, like that meeting fatigue, like I'm on camera from 9 to 5. Like, I don't even know when I'm supposed to get my work done, right? So I'm just exhausted. And me speaking to them actually made them feel better, because they didn't realize that they were struggling as much as I did. But because of my courageousness and my just being who I am and just being real, like it actually helped them, and it was a more fruitful conversation. So know that you're not alone. You're never alone. And that, you know, as long as you create this environment of people or individuals, personally and professionally, both ways, that you can lean on, like, don't be afraid to leverage them. And don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, there's been many times where I've been afraid to ask for help, and ashamed and guilt and all of these negative emotions that come into it. And then I take a step back and I'm like, well, if I don't do this, I'm going to still be in the same spot I am today. So that courageous leap, I recommend everybody to do. And if not, feel free to message me, or I'm sure any of the other panelists or anybody at Ramba that would be more than happy to kind of help you through and, you know, game plan some of those conversations if you are struggling on how to even approach them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. A lot of really interesting ideas, and I think a lot to take out of that. I'll quickly pause. I do have some more questions that I can ask, but I would love to hear if there's any questions from anyone else in the room as well. So I'm happy to use the hand raising if someone, I mean, we're small enough that I think people can just jump off mute as well. So if there's any questions about motivation, about something the panelists touched on, I'd love to hear it. I can also kick us off, but I'll give another 30 seconds to see if anyone has anything they want to ask. All right. Oh, awesome. Oh, thanks, Amanda. Yep. So feel free to type it in the chat. Feel free to ask it out loud. In the meantime, I will ask one more question of our panelists, something that I thought of as you were all speaking. So all of you have been in your career for different amounts of time. You've gone through promotions, different types of roles. You've had different things change in your personal lives. And I'd love to hear if any of you have any thoughts on how motivation has changed over the course of your career, and like what major professional or personal aspects of your life have been the biggest drivers in that change of motivation.
I can take that one to start if you're good with it. So for me, it's always been significant things in my life that have occurred, right? Like, and that's why like we joke, like we say the personal and professional, but like I'm the same person I am at work as I am at home. Like there's no difference. Like it's Angela at Prudential and it's Angela here at this conference today. Like you're not going to get a difference if you go to one of my meetings. But the reason why I say that is a lot of what I do in my life is around my family, right? So like if I'm, example, recently just got engaged, I am extremely motivated at work to get a promotion, to get to the next level, to really like make my family proud because I want to provide for them, right? Like I want to bring more. So right now I'm super motivated. Now ask me in 2 weeks and we'll see if we have the same conversation. But right now I'm extremely motivated. I find that I go through like ebbs and flows. Usually it's around like I want to do something new. I get into a new career. Okay, I crush it for a year or so. And then I'm like, all right, I got it. I got it down. I got it down. This is kind of boring. It's kind of getting, the mundane. And then it's, all right, here's my spike of motivation. So what I would say is that lean into those motivations when you have it, especially those extra bursts. And the other thing is that you'll probably realize that they usually coincide with something that you have personally going on. For instance, like I was talking to my sister and she recently had a baby and she's like, I have zero motivation right now at work because I'm focusing on my family. And I'm like, that's okay. That is okay. You don't need to do one and the same, right? And I think just being real with yourself and being real with where you're at, like emotions wise, is okay. And there's no wrong way. Like if you want to just have like pockets of motivation, like it's okay. It is okay. But for me personally, I would say my motivation definitely tends to be when I have something going on personally that I really want to achieve, or Anna mentioned it earlier about sometimes those extra things that you do on the side get you motivation. Like even being asked to be a part of this panel today, like I'm raring to go. Like I'm like so excited. I'm like volunteering for things at work. And then like afterwards, I'm like, I shouldn't have done that, but I did. But like, I'm excited that I did that. So I think like that's the other thing is like, partner it with things that make you happy. And if it's not just your day job, what else can you do to fulfill that circle, right? So if you think of like your whole, right? You're a whole circle. There's pieces of me from all different areas. Sorry, the Italian in me is talking. There's pieces of me from all different areas. So like there's the personal aspect, there's the dog in the background that gets me excited. There's, the work aspect. So like fill yourself up whatever way you need to. So yeah, that's my spiel on that.
Anyone else want to jump in on that, or?
Yeah, so thank you, Angela, for sharing that. I completely, 100% agree with you, and I'm aligned with that. I think for me as well, when I first started my career, for example, I was chasing the wrong things, for example, money, and, that at that point, that was my motivation. Now, a couple of years into my career, I'm focused on something completely different, experience. That's what I want to get out of it. So I think as you progress throughout your career and you kind of learn what you like and what you dislike, I think your priorities are going to change and you change as a result. So what motivates you will then also change. But I think the key to that is, even though it's ever changing, you have to remain true to yourself and true to what you want, and not try to, I guess, fake whatever, what other people are doing, so just stay true to yourself.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add. I totally agree with all of that. And then I'll say my motivation also changes throughout the week. Like Mondays are always rough. There's very few Mondays that I'm like, yes, I'm so motivated. Like I'm ready to go. Fridays, I'm actually quite motivated. Thursdays too. So anyway, it varies kind of during the week, and actually knowing that about myself is helpful. I used to like hit a slump on Wednesdays, and we started calling Wednesdays mini Fridays during COVID. And we like eat burgers on Wednesdays or whatever, something that's less healthy than what we eat the rest of the week. And so anyway, mine almost ebbs and flows more during the week maybe than during different points in my career, but I agree with everything that's been said. And Angela, your point around sometimes you have personal stuff we have 2 dogs. The first time I got like the first one and dog number 2, I couldn't care much about work. I took time off, and then I'd feel guilty when the puppy would look at me and paw my keyboard. I'd be like, oh, okay. So it kind of ebbs and flows, but also, I mean, for me in COVID, it's been more during the week, interestingly, than sort of big arcs of time.
It's interesting. And, you know, we have a question from the chat that came to me. So Heather Ray Martin is multitasking with work. As all of us know, work bleeds into personal, bleeds into Rhonda these days. But she wanted me to ask a question. So could the panel touch on being alone or being the only? And noting that it's a reality for people in the LGBTQ community, and even within that, being the only trans or non-conforming individual, being the only Black person within that community in corporate America. Have any of you had that experience or had experience dealing with being kind of the only in a room?
Yeah, so I started at McKinsey out of our Dubai, well, I started in DC, but then full-time joined out of the Dubai office, and it is illegal. Homosexuality is illegal in the UAE. And as a result, I was pretty closeted my first 6 months or so. And I felt like I wasn't only. Like, I remember being in environments where people, like, it was not even like a thing people thought was possible. You know, like, they'd ask me about my boyfriends or whatever. And I just remember feeling really alone. And then the light bulb that went off was, we had our GLAM conference that year in New York. And no matter where in the world you were invited. And so I went over to New York for this conference. And in that conference, I discovered that there were 6 other people in the Dubai office that were also part of GLAM. And we all got together and said, okay, cool, we're not alone, even though it's a big office, and so it can feel like we're alone. But what can we do to feel less alone? And so I would say, if you're in a multinational company, the thing we did after we discovered each other was actually call, like, the head of GLAM at the time, Brian, who many of you may have met in Ramba. And we were like, Brian, there's 6 of us in the Middle East, which is amazing. What do we do? Like, what advice do you have for us in terms of, we're thinking of maybe doing an allies program? And so that was the beginning of McKinsey's GLAM allies program back in like 2010, I think. And so don't underestimate the power in a global company of like the broader network outside of the team you're on or the office you're in. That was really big for us in Dubai. And then, I don't know, I found that the moment I like was actually out, then I discovered that there were more people versus when I wasn't. But it was hard, honestly, until I realized, like, oh geez, I don't need to be by myself. I can go to the GLAM conference, I can meet other people, etc.
Thanks, Anna, for sharing. Is there anyone else who wants to share a similar experience? Or we have a few other questions, but I would love to hear more on the topic. All right, we have another interesting question from Danielle Zarvin. Danielle, do you want to jump off mute and ask it yourself?
I can do that. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My question is, how do you navigate certain work environments where the nature of the job is often in direct conflict with people being able to achieve motivations in their personal life?
I'll take that one unless somebody else wants to, but I'm being super real and honest, which I just tend to be. You might want to start reevaluating things. And the reason why I say that is not because that job won't afford you those things, but you're going to miss out on the opportunities in life. And those are the moments that are going to matter the most. I would first and foremost probably start to have a conversation with your manager and just talk about some of these things that are coming up. Maybe there is more room for flexibility and you just haven't had the opportunity to see that yet. So like, I would first start there. And then if not, maybe I would have other conversations with employees. Are they feeling the same way? You know, maybe it's a broader issue. Maybe it's something systemic within the organization that, you know, maybe you could be the person to bring it to light or create a new program or create something like take the problem, as I like to call it, and create a solution for it and like make a name for yourself by doing so. Maybe you do something where you know, Anna was talking about Wednesday, she has burgers, right? Like maybe you guys do something like that in your organization and say, hey, we're busting our butts. Like, can we just do something together as a team from like 4 to 5? Now, again, I know that you'd rather do something personally than with work, but maybe you start there. Maybe that's one instance where you can make an effort to try to change that perception and then start to have those conversations. Again, not an easy task by any means, so I know that, but at least making people aware of the situation is the first thing, because you might be surprised that some people might not feel the same way, or they do. And then the second thing I would say is maybe at the end of the day, after you try a couple of those steps, maybe that organization isn't the best for you because you want to work somewhere, going back to that culture and having that work-life balance, just like for me and my importance of having an environment where I can bring my true authentic self to work. Like that's important to me, right? So I think really sit back and think about what's important to you, and then, go from there. Again, not bashing your company or wherever you work by any means. I just want to make sure that like you get the most, like you have one life. Like you have one life. So like really make sure that it is the right place for you. And maybe it's not. And I think you're asking the question because you already know the answer. You just don't want to think about it. You know what I mean? Like that's usually when people ask the questions, they know it, and it's those hard answers that they don't want to deal with, which trust me, I'm the same way. So I get it.
Angela, that was very poignant. And I think in the interest of time, we'll probably just answer that one. I can't imagine having anything better to throw onto that. I wanted to leave it with the panelists for one more opportunity. Is there any one last couple of sentence piece of advice regarding motivation that any of you want to share with the panelists, or a big takeaway in your own lives?
Yeah, sure. So I'll tell you what one of my sponsors actually has told me, and it's basically to let them reject you. And, it's something that I definitely live by. So if you're feeling like you're not sure about an opportunity or job, like I mentioned before, you just need to go for it, and they'll give you feedback if they didn't select you, but don't underestimate yourself, and let them reject you.
I love that. Anna, any last thoughts, last pieces of advice?
Just take the 5-year view into account. I've just found it to be so clarifying. And would you in 5 years be happy with the thing you're obsessing over today? Probably not. It'd probably be like, oh, chill out. That's been the most helpful thing for me.
Awesome. And Angela, any last thoughts before we break?
I think if I can give anything, is that like, don't lose sight of yourself to please somebody else, whether it's a company, whether it's another whoever. At the end of the day, you need to put your head on the pillow wherever you sleep at night and be okay with that. So just take that into consideration, like throughout your day, whether it's a company, a relationship, whatever it may be. Are you happy, and is this going to make you a better version of yourself?
Great, thanks. And I think, as again, we've talked about multiple times with the personal invading the professional invading the realm, but I think Laura has stepped off for a work call. So Laura, if you're there and you want to share something, feel free to jump on. But otherwise, I want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists. It's been really interesting. I have learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else on the panel has as well. So at this point, if anyone wants to unmute themselves, we can give them a quick round of applause. Otherwise, you can say your thanks in the chat. But thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And this room will be open. I want to be cognizant of everyone's timelines because I know it's the middle of the day. But this room will stay open for about 10 minutes. So if anyone wants to have any last thoughts or chat, I will be here. Our panelists are welcome to stay or welcome to hop off. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of Rumba.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks again, panelists, for joining. It was great to have you guys. And Amanda, thank you for joining as well. I know you had a class conflict, so I appreciate you being here.
Oh, of course. Thank you for moderating. That was really great. Thank you all so much for coming and sharing.